So while we're talking about stupidity, let's talk about video games. Not because video games themselves are stupid, but because a lot of stupid stuff is talked about video games. The culture and the arts is one of the things that broadens our minds, broadens our soul, makes it easier for us to acquire information that we don't like. And so that makes us prepared to understand that the world has things we don't like in them. And sometimes our heroes turn out to be villains, and sometimes the guys we like make big mistakes. And those are things that we have to learn. And all of that takes a big soul. You have to have a big soul to have an open mind. That's the way that works, right? And you hear a lot of guys, especially on the right.
I see a video game industry that teaches young people to kill.
But you hear it on the left too. The left tends to think, oh, the video games are bad because of their content.
This is what it does. It appeals to like the male fantasy.
They're violent, they're manly, they have men in them being men, and they have girls with nice figures, because a lot of young boys play them, so they want to look at girls with nice figures. We adults don't want to look at girls with nice figures. We hate that. But you get a lot of this stuff that, men shouldn't waste their time playing. On the right, you get this, men shouldn't waste their time playing video games. Men should waste their time telling other men what to do. And I don't agree with any of this stuff. I don't agree with any of it. It always makes me, I love the fact here at the Daily Wire, they're always teasing me about being old because I'm 172 and they're 12. But the funny thing is a lot of them, I listen to their opinions and I think they sound like they're 80 and I have the emotional intelligence of a 14-year-old. Let's start with this. Are video games good or bad? Because they come under a lot of flack from both the left and the right. First of all, there's nothing wrong with having some kind of harmless entertainment that you like. I do a lot of puzzles. I love puzzles. I play video games from time to time. Obviously, you don't want that to take away from doing your job or fulfilling your responsibilities as an adult in your family and all those things. But when I was in Afghanistan, when I was embedded with the troops, just before I got there, the day before I got there, in fact, I was supposed to be there a day earlier and I missed my helicopter. The people that I was with, the unit that I was being embedded with, got attacked, came under fire. And I was immediately like, oh, I missed it because I'm an idiot. And so I wanted to put that as part of the story I was writing. And so I went around and interviewed the guys who had come under fire so I could hear their story. And one of the guys was a gunner in one of the Humvees who had been hit. Luckily, thank God, his armor had saved him, so he wasn't hurt. And he was playing, I think it was Call of Duty. He was playing war after getting shot at the day before. He was actually playing a video game. So manly men play video games. Everybody has harmless things that they do to entertain themselves. But it goes beyond that with me. It goes beyond that with me. Recently, we put out a video of me playing God of War, and I was looking at the comments on YouTube, and there were a lot of comments going, he's not really playing that. He's too old. Isn't it nice that such an elderly gentleman could be playing God of War? But I am the original gamer gangster, right? I was there at the beginning when you guys weren't born, and I was with video games from the beginning and went through their period of greatest development. And it meant a lot to me because I'm an artist and because I care about the way people tell stories and the things that are beautiful. When I was a little kid, I used to love board games and things like that and puzzles. I still love puzzles. And I used to actually have dreams before I discovered girls. When I was 10 or 11, I would daydream about games that would run themselves. So instead of just playing with figures on a game, the figures would be moved by mechanics, by electricity, which was what we had then instead of what we have now, which is magic. But then we had electricity and I would have those dreams. And when I first saw the first video game, which was Pong, when I was in college back in the 70s, it was like that scene in 2001. Do you remember the scene in 2001 where the monkeys see the great Earth Stone? That was my reaction to seeing Pong. I thought, oh my God, it is actually happening. And then, my life began. And so I stopped. I wasn't playing Pong all the time. And I missed the development that was going on until one day I was a newspaper reporter in a small county outside of New York City. And we used to gather around the pinball machine and talk about the day's stories. I actually beat Adam Nagurney, who went on to be the New York Times top political reporter. I beat him in a pinball contest and won a gigantic stuffed pink dog, somewhere a picture of me weighing about 40 pounds more than I weigh now and smoking a cigarette with that pink dog exists. And Nagurney was a really sore loser about it. But I beat him fair and square. And so we'd play pinball. And then one day we walked into one of the restaurants in town and Space Invaders had come out. And for me, again, it was love at first sight. I used to come in there with rolls of quarters until one day I woke up and I had a bump on the back of my wrist. I know I've told this story before. I went to a doctor and I said, what's this bump on the back of my wrist? And the doctor said, have you been making repeated pressing motions lately? And in fact, I had been hitting this button. I was the first person I knew to get Space Invaders wrist, which that very Sunday was in the newspaper because it was an actual phenomenon because everybody was playing Space Invaders.
Tino's Sinovitis, or Space Invader's wrist. Continual sharp repetitive movement of the thumb or wrist causes the tendon to become inflamed.
When I was married, which was right after I left the newspaper, I got as a wedding present, I got an Atari. I remember being just absolutely in love with the little airplane game in the Atari. Now it looks hilariously primitive, but at the time it was, to me, the same as flying a plane. But really the turnaround came. The time when I started to think this is important was Super Mario, because one day I remember, I think I was playing with my little daughter, Faith, and I said, an Italian plumber fighting evil mushrooms while he goes off to rescue a princess has got to be one of the most creative and insane ideas I have ever heard. No one would ever write that novel. No one would ever write that movie.
They're brothers. They're plumbers.
I mean, I'm sure they were on drugs when they invented it. But I thought still there is something about it that is so wildly creative, so wildly like new and modern that I just thought this is amazing. Also a great game. And so this is something that I didn't realize that this was just going to get better and better. You have to understand, when I was a little kid, products were always coming out that were new and improved. And then you'd get them and they'd be exactly the same as they were before. And you could read the ingredients. They were the same as they were before, but they had new and improved on it. So I never believed anything was new and improved. One day I got a computer with floppy disks, the original computers with floppy disks, and I was writing my first film, A Shock to the System with Michael Caine. And I invented what are now called macros. I invented combinations of keystrokes that would cause there to be a dialogue line and an action line. And I programmed this into the computer. And every time I would use it, the computer would stop like an old Jewish man who'd go, "Ay, ah," and I'd be writing this exciting scene with guns and chases and fights. And here we are, and suddenly the computer would go, wait a minute, I can't like this scene. And somebody said to me, you've got to go and get a hard drive because now computers are new and improved. And I said, new and improved never means anything. Then I got a hard drive and I thought, oh, and it really was like illumination. I thought, oh, now when they say something is new and improved, it will actually be new and improved. This is a new world. And that's what happened to video games. And because I was busy and because I had a life and a career that I was running, I'd only see them from time to time. And every time they had changed so drastically. You know, I'm a ghost story fanatic. I was living in London and I got this game, Realms of the Haunting. It was one of the early first-person shooters. And I was playing this game thinking, oh, what a brilliant idea. Not because of the story. I've never been able to understand a video game story, but because it was drawing you in to this thing by the gameplay, so you were actually there. And when I got Diablo, which came out the same year, I just broke my mouse by playing that so much. It was so amazing, so amazingly real. And all of these I saw were drawing me into a world through gameplay, which was a new thing. Nobody had ever done that before. It hadn't happened. The technology didn't exist. Now, ultimately, I have to tell you that ultimately I began to feel that the gameplay and the storytelling were in tension with one another, that very elaborate stories slowed down the gameplay to the point where it wasn't interesting, whereas intense gameplay didn't allow for a story. It was still evocative. I remember playing Resident Evil 3. I was thinking the third one, the zombie one, with my daughter, and we had to keep handing the controller back and forth because when you held the controller, it was just too scary. This was the first game I played that actually had events happen outside of your moving them. So you would be moving along and something would spring out of a locker, and that had never happened before. It was really frightening. You were in the world, and I understood this to be a new thing, but the stories were simply repetitive. And now I feel that people are always saying to me, oh, have you seen The Last of Us? What a great story. It's not a great story. It's still just killing zombies. They're very repetitive stories, but really it's the gameplay pulling you in to an artistic world, a beautiful screen world, God of War, which I'm still playing, just amazingly pulling you into this world. That's the experience of video games. The one exception are these puzzle games, mostly indie games like Limbo and Braid and Inside, Year Walk. Most most recently a game called Gorogoa that Spencer and I played, and it was just amazing. And what these things do is they create an aura of mystery, so the story doesn't have to be complicated. You sort of add the story in your brain by filling in the mystery, and by solving the puzzle, you are sucked into these really elaborate and beautiful and simple worlds. And that, to me, is where the art of video game goes. So, what does it mean if they're art? See, a lot of people play video games and think, well, it's art, it's art. But art is an interesting thing, you know. Just because something's an art form doesn't mean everything in it is a work of art, like there are crappy movies that aren't works of art. And even if it is a work of art, doesn't mean you're using it as art. The purpose of art is to enhance life. That phrase, art for art's sake, which has been around since at least the 19th century, that's not true. The creator creates art for art's sake. He does it because it's beautiful. He does his job, right? He's not trying to save the world. He does his job. But the beauty, as Dostoevsky said, beauty will save the world. The beauty saves the world by enhancing your soul. But it doesn't have to enhance your soul. You have to open yourself up to it. There are lots of college professors I have met in my life who have read absolutely everything, but they're bastards. The Nazis who ran the death camps sometimes sat around and listened to Bach, but I don't think it was enhancing their souls, or they wouldn't have been running death camps. You have to engage with art in a certain way. And the way you engage with art, in order for art to humanize you, you have to set aside your opinions and your values for just a moment and let the art wash over you. It doesn't mean you have to watch things that you find disgusting or ugly. It just means you have to, when you find something that's beautiful, you don't have to pass judgment on it until it's over. Experience what it is to live in a world of beauty that somehow is also strange. I frequently talk to you about the Pieta. I talk about the Pieta because it is the most beautiful statue I think ever made, and yet it's a depiction of the worst thing that can happen, losing a child, a dead child, and the worst thing that can happen to the world, the murder of God. And it's an amazing piece of beautiful thing, but you have to let the beauty wash over you so you understand that even in grief, life can be beautiful. This is the thing I hate about this debate over video games. A lot of times we debate stupidly in America, as I've been saying all through this show. And one of the ways we debate stupidly is by using extremes. We say, this child played video games for 7 hours and then went out and killed somebody, you know? And the thing is, if he was playing video games for 7 hours, if a child was playing video games for 7 hours, he didn't have a father. He didn't have a parent looking out for him. That's why he went out and killed somebody. It wasn't the video games. It's the fact that nobody was taking care of him and nobody was watching him and experiencing these things with him. If you're playing video games for 7 hours, if you're not paying attention to your life, to your love life, to your work life, to all the responsibilities that you have, if instead of talking at the dinner table and joining your family, you're sitting around playing, Angry Birds on your phone, then no, that is wrong. Then you can go and listen to Matt Walsh tell you it's wrong.
It's deeply disordered and dehumanizing.
That would be true, too, if you were reading books instead of paying attention to your family. If you engage with video games as harmless entertainment, and if you engage with video games as the experience of beauty, I think that they are a new thing, a new way of experiencing the world. I think they are, in fact, what painting used to be. I think they are an advance on painting, which is now a dead art form. It doesn't mean no one will ever paint a good picture. It simply means that most modern art is garbage. Jackson Pollock is garbage. That form, that visual art, is now in video games, and if you experience it that way, I think it can really move you and it can really change your life. For more absolutely incredible Klavan-y goodness, like and subscribe to The Andrew Klavan Show wherever you get your podcasts.